are very welcome once again to Writer's Block with myself, Miriam O'Gara. And today we have a fantastic author on the show with us. Larry Strauss has joined us from Los Angeles, and he is an all-rounder in so many ways. Recognized as a veteran teacher, he is also a ghostwriter, an author of fiction, quasi-fiction at times. He's been a stand-up comedian. He's been an artist. He's been an actor, you name it. He knows the arts industry, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show today. Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Lovely to see it. Look, you've had, 17, 18 books or something similar to that published?
Something like that, yeah.
If you go on to Goodreads, everybody, you'll find Larry Strauss, you'll find a string of amazing books. But I see in your biography, of course, we can come at your biography from so many different ways with a very famous mother who we'll come to in a moment. But you started out writing, you started out teaching, you worked for a while on Transformers, the first 3 series of Transformers. What gave you this impetus, this need to write?
I've often thought about that. I think one thing is feeling misunderstood as a child, I think is a good training ground to be a writer, wanting to, looking for another audience, looking for other people to connect with. I think that's part of it. But, I think everything I've done, like my teaching and my writing, it's just something I'm good at. And we all embrace things that we're good at. I mean, I know that as a teacher, if a student is down on themselves, you gotta help them find what they're good at and find a way to be good and successful, and then they'll get motivated. So that's what motivated me. Was I actually started writing. Well, I should say I wrote something. I was a terrible student, but I wrote something. I wrote an essay about my neighborhood growing up, and my 5th grade teacher got it published.
Ooh.
And a friend of hers literary, and that that always stuck with me. She's like, you're really good. And I mean, I've read that, and I thought, for a 5th grader, it's pretty good. It has a lot of.
You've
passion.
Actually read it back.
Oh yeah, I have copies.
That wasn't bad.
I mean, my mother was saved everything, and I took after her. My father liked to purge, but my mother and I, we saved everything. So
the great Charlotte Ray, fantastic.
And then, thank you. And then, embarrassingly enough, I started writing. The first things I wrote were as an adult or a semi-adult were screenplays, and I was inspired by the Rocky movie. Sylvester Stallone was like some meathead that I grew up with. He was just like a guy you'd find on the corner. And so the fact that he'd written an Oscar award-winning screenplay, I think it probably made a lot of meatheads like me think, I'm going to do it too.
But his writing posterity has shown what an incredible writer he is.
Yeah, it was a great script. I mean, it wasn't everything about it wasn't, original, but the totality of it was original and beautiful, and it was so right. It was like the right moment.
Yeah.
And I always I don't know if he lived in the San Fernando Valley, but I just always assumed that he was, this struggling actor who was living in the valley. And of course, Balboa is a street, Balboa Boulevard. You can see it on the 405. So I was just imagining him like, on some lonely Saturday night, and he's working on a screenplay, and he goes out for food, and he's trying to figure out what to call his character. And he's like, and he sees the sign. I have no idea. But, I always imagine like, I'll call him Rocky Balboa. So I started writing, and again, I got encouragement. People read it, and now they probably were just being nice to me, but it was the encouragement was all I needed to just keep going.
Do you feel, Larry, that being exposed to scripts in your household growing up would have had any influence? Would you have taken note of their structure and form?
I don't remember don't remember them that much. I mean, growing up, my mother was in the theater, and I don't remember seeing her plays, or I just wasn't interested in them. I was totally disinterested in that. I mean, I liked seeing her on stage. I thought it was cool that, and seeing her on commercials and stuff. But no, it's interesting. I did not have, like, I know a lot of writers it's very early, that they're into it, and including some of my students. I have students who've been writing for years, and but I wasn't like that. I was very non-literate, and so I had a lot of catching up to do. I'm still catching up. I mean, I was not well.
It's sometimes more fun if you do it that way. You come at art from a different direction, and then it takes you somewhere else. It's forever opening doors, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, if you peak too soon, there's that's never,
Yes.
That's not great either. So I've never had to worry about peaking too soon. I hopefully still haven't peaked yet.
Well, Larry, we're going to talk today about Light Man, which is the first edition, came out 30th of September 2021. We would pronounce it Kearney Street Books. In America, maybe you say Kearney.
Yeah.
But it's an Irish name. So we would call it Kearney over here. But Kearney, if you're in the States or if you're in Canada listening, that's where you go to find this. It's on all of the online bookstore outlets as well. Wonderful book. I finished reading it today. But just before we come to that, if you don't mind, can I actually go to one that really, really, I absolutely enjoyed as much? And it is your Students First and Other Lies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read that through, and I thought it was absolutely on the nose, on the button.
Thank you.
You really speak the mind of so many teachers. And as I mentioned off air to you, although I'm a performer, from the age of 21, I was in teaching. That was my fallback. And I went through phases of my life of 5 and 6 years where I was in full-time teaching. And you described so many things that I could totally agree with, And some of the lies, like you say, one of them that you mentioned, more money won't solve anything in schools. It's about using the resources with good common sense and wisely. Right. And it is shocking how often how few occasions that happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad because I know that not spending money is also destructive, but it's just when you watch how badly money is used and how much waste. And I think I wrote that before my school district spent $500 million on iPads that today are just piled up. And I mean, it was 8 years ago, but still they're just piles of garbage. And $500 million. I know. And I don't think we got $500 million worth of education out of them either. They were the problem is the decisions are made at the wrong level. They're made by people who don't know anything about teaching and learning, and there's corruption. I mean, yes. I think the superintendent Daisy who did that should have been arrested. I mean, there was corrupt. He was connected to the people. He overpaid for them. All that stuff. But the sad thing is that when you've seen money well spent, you think, well, but saying money doesn't fix the problem is also because money can fix it, but it feels sometimes like it never will because it's never going to be spent in the right way.
I know that also heads of department. I don't know exactly how the American system works. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I'm familiar with the Irish and the British systems. And if you've got head teachers and heads of department who are allowed to actually be involved in the budgeting, who are allowed to make the decisions, and that's great, but it's so rare. And you have this box ticking exercise by, school boards, and then a mad rush at the end of the year to use up the budget.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It
wasn't used wisely.
It's the same thing. Because if you don't spend the money, you won't get it next year. Exactly. And you actually get in trouble because you probably should, because the money was allocated for kids and you didn't spend it on the kids. Saving it on that, isn't really, although that said, the school district should should be saving money, because the tax collection, it's, the economy is cyclical, and and every so often we get a recession, and then everyone's like, we ran out of money, whereas you're wasting it, you're wasting it 2 years ago, and now you have to lay off teachers. We laid off so many we laid off so many teachers back in this last recession, the big recession after 2008. I mean, it was a few years later that it caught up to schools. And now there's an acute teacher shortage, because all those young teachers said, forget this, I'm not going to go through this. And people didn't go into teaching because it didn't look promising, because people were getting laid off. And now all the old teachers like me are at retirement age. And so, the whole thing is this gigantic blunder.
And it's, as I say, it's global. I mean, it's very difficult to sack a teacher in this part of the world. Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But one of the things you talked about was the sacking of teachers based on test scores. And that really shocked me, because we actually don't. Sometimes that can be a frustration here, because classes can be doing quite badly and the teacher is not held to account. So you've got the other extreme happening.
Oh, absolutely. No. But you don't need test scores to know that.
No,
I mean,
you don't.
Can spend an hour in the classroom, talk to the students. The students at my school know who, they'll tell you who are the good teachers, who are the teachers they don't like, but they learn in their class, who are the teachers who are a waste of time. They know. It's not a secret. It's not a mystery. I think the reason for the testing is just simple. It's political expedience. If you can waive a test score and say, we went up 20%, and then it becomes the argument. It becomes, the justification. I look at me, I came into power, and now the scores went up. But it doesn't say everything. And it's often the wrong measure too, because those tests are a measure of mediocrity. They're not even.
They are, exactly.
They're not even good tests. They're and they take up our time, and they take millions of dollars, and it's a big waste, and it's based on the fact that they don't trust teachers, and we don't trust students. I mean, we don't trust students, we don't trust teachers. And some teachers are probably not accountable to themselves. The teachers you want in the classroom, you don't need to hold them accountable with a test. They hold themselves accountable every day. They hold themselves to a much higher standard.
Yes.
They're up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, those 5 students in the back of the class, I'm not reaching them. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, and as you say in this book, we've got to foster a culture of them being our students, and not pitting teachers off against each other. Your teachers have been a problem. The blame game is a huge issue. Yeah. And another issue that I found very annoying over the years, and it did put me off teaching from time to time, was basically just finding yourself in a situation where you were having to carry the can for other people. What you inherited was just almost impossible. Like, for example, you go in as a sub, and the class has had maybe 8 subs, 10 subs.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not going to get the attention of the student.
It's really hard.
Can they not revise that situation? Why is it a school board can't have a pool of subs who are introduced to a class?
Yes, the school should have their own subs who everyone knows. I mean, that's what they do in a lot of private schools. You don't have some stranger coming in. You have people who are familiar, who are part of the community. Yeah, absolutely. I have to confess, though, for my ego, when I took my job, the job I've had for 30 years now, I was the 3rd teacher of that year. 3rd or 4th? No, I was the 3rd teacher. And the kids hated the other 2. So the bar was very low for me. And I just stepped right in, and it was like, I was great, and I was not a great teacher, but by comparison, it worked great for me. And now, I used to, when I was teaching 10th grade English, and the ninth grade English teacher was not a lot of fun and not very imaginative. Not a bad teacher. Like, he was worked hard and he was very structured and organized, but his class was no fun. And so I just got to be like the superstar teacher because the kids had come from him. So,
Which is fantastic. Yeah, you can get so lucky with the group.
I feel bad for the kids, though. I mean, they should. I feel I'm so glad when I'm not the best teacher in the building. I don't even want to be the top. I don't even want to be one of the best. I want the students to have so many great teachers that I'm just another teacher to them.
Do you have in the United States, do you have this situation, which sadly we have over here, where people have to re-interview for their jobs every year?
In some schools, yeah, they were doing that. I haven't heard of them doing it much in my district lately, but I remember when they were. Yeah, when a school is declared failing, then they would, the idea is, well, it's the teachers. So let's re-interview, let's see if we can find better teachers. But number one, you don't have enough to choose from to find your better, if there are better teachers. Number two, how about better conditions?
Yes.
How about figuring out how to make the job more, how to make teaching something you can do without having to go to extreme measures, extreme efforts, without having to work around the clock. And then, the other thing is a lot of the times those schools that are failing have a lot of new teachers. And it's not that they're failing because they have new teachers, although I'll be the first to say I was a much better teacher 5 years in than at the beginning, and much better 10 years in. But it's that those are, the schools that are succeeding, the teachers stay there. And the schools that are struggling, it's a revolving door of teachers and administrators. There's no one has any ownership over the school. People just keep revolving in and out. So
yeah, whereas over here that doesn't make any difference. Even the ones that are succeeding, the days of the permanent contract or having a full-time job in second level education is gone now.
Yeah.
Which is very demotivating for anyone.
It's just a power grab. It's just a way for politicians to exert power. They don't know those people are ignorant to how people learn. They know nothing. It's a stunt. It's a political stunt. If you want to make schools good, figure out how to make every teacher successful. The same way, if you want to be a good teacher, figure out a way every student in your class can be a success. Every student should feel successful. I have a Samuel Beckett quote on my wall, in the back of my wall. It's one of his most famous ones. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And I tell students, fail better. I tell them every day, like, you're here to fail. You're here to fail. You're only, yeah, of course, the essay you wrote, yeah, it's got to get better, but that's what you're here to do. It's perfect for where you are, but of course I fail every day too, and I learn from it. And when they get a fail on their report card, that's garbage. That's nonsense. That's not the grade. Every student failed, but they should be rewarded for it. They should be congratulated. You keep failing better every day, and the people outside the system don't understand that. They just want validation. They want numbers.
They want numbers, boxes ticked, validation. Yes.
And when we bring new teachers into the system and we just throw them in, we just dump them in to the deep water. We just throw them in and say, survive or don't survive. And then when they don't survive, oh, well, I guess it's not for you. And when somebody does survive, see, that's the way you survive. You just throw them in. That's nonsense. And it doesn't work. It clearly doesn't work, because all over the country, you have students in classrooms we wouldn't want our child in, where they're chaotic and the teacher is overwhelmed, doesn't know what to do. the solution is
How
the
do you feel about training at the moment in your
oh,
profession
it's
over
a
there?
disaster. It's a disaster. It's not there's no imagination in how they do it. Again, it serves the universities. The universities get their money, the retired teachers get their jobs. No, it's not. You want to train teachers, get them into, first of all, put them in the building from day one. Get them fingerprinted to make sure they're not, criminals and pedophiles. Give them a TB test and put them in the building and put them to work. They should be grading papers. They should be learning how to do that before they have to take over a class. They should be tutoring kids. They should be understanding who kids are and how to relate to them on a one-to-one before they get into a whole classroom. They should be observing. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these things happen in the process, but they should be in the building and they should be supporting us because we need the support. We need, we can use more resources in the building. And then
But you know something, Larry, and I discovered this very late because my husband's a teacher as well, maths and physics. And he used to mark and still continues to mark the state exams.
mm-hmm.
So he said to me, would you not do it? So I did it for a few years. It's extremely stressful, but I did it for a few years. And do you know, afterwards I said, I think every teacher should do it at least once,
mm-hmm.
because it totally changes how you teach.
How so?
You start seeing, because, well, the way it works over here, you get scripts sent to you from every single county in the country. And you don't know what schools they're from, but you start to see when you're marking the exams over a 3-week period, you start to see, oh my gosh, certain schools and certain things are being are not being taught by the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to realize, I've actually got to change some of my own teaching style to marry up with what I'm seeing here. And it was quite shocking, but I was glad I did it for a few years, but I wouldn't want to have done it much longer. But once is enough to do it. And it's just something that I felt anyone who feels they're a born teacher, if they could consider doing that, it would be marvelous because it'll really help your teaching.
Sure. Yeah. You know what else every teacher should do? I actually, about 15 years ago? Yeah, about 16 years ago, one of my students got in a car accident. He was a senior. He was in my advanced placement English class, and he got in a car accident, and so he couldn't come to school. I think he broke his leg or something. And so our school district has a homeschool resource where they'll send a teacher to a kid's house 5 hours a week to sort of keep him going so that he, can pass at least his math and English class. And then if you can manage anything else. So they couldn't find an AP teacher, somebody who could do AP. So they asked me to do it. So they processed me. And then I started getting calls to do it for kids from other schools. And I did it for about 12 years. I did this homeschooling where I would go after work, after my regular job, I would go to homes. Some of them were kids who'd been in accidents. Some of them were kids who were sick. Some of them had cancer. They were in chemo. Some of them had been gunshot victims. And I got to see how a lot of the kids in the community where I teach live. And every teacher needs to experience that. Some kids have 2 parents in the house, bright, cheerful house, modest. I mean, it's a poor community. But other kids are literally living in darkness. There are
Absolutely right.
There are no light bulbs. There's cigarette smoke choking the air. There's little kids running around, no furniture in the place. I mean, the saddest thing was like, I was working with a kid. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He'd been shot in the neck a year earlier, and I'm working with him, and we're trying. We're reading. We're doing what we can because he can't write anything at this point. He had a little movement in his arm. I got him a computer where he could move the mouse around, but it's very slow going. So these little kids see that, their big brother has a teacher, and they're running up to me with their coloring books. They want to show me stuff. and they want me, or they want me to help them with their homework, and you just see like what, there's single mothers overwhelmed, sometimes, sometimes with drug addiction, and, and I think until you understand what kids go home to, you don't necessarily understand when you give 2 hours of homework to a kid, where's he going to do this homework and how's he going to do this homework?
Exactly. I remember a terrible shock that I got when one particular young man, huge big chap, he was about 6 foot tall. He was, of course, he was in his final year. Your K-12, I think it is now, isn't it? And our 6th year. And dropped him back to the house, tiny little house, was brought inside, and he's sharing a bedroom with his 9-year-old sister. He has no desk. He's 18. He has no private space at all for himself. No privacy.
Yeah.
And he's working, trying to do, again, this is where I struggle with the technology here, although we're using it all the time in school and it must be used now. But when you have someone trying to do their schoolwork off their phone, not even a tablet.
Oh yeah, no, all my kids. I have kids out in a car.
The young man was under. And he was 3 months away from his summer exams. I have a student right now, and she's applying to some of the top colleges in the country. She does her homework in a car under a street light on a street in Compton because she lives in one room with 6 other people. It's very hard.
She's not alone. So, I mean, it's good to push kids. I always push kids, but you push, but you got to be understanding too.
Well,
you can't make them feel bad because their circumstances are,
So Larry, was this the prompt to write this book, Students First and Other Lies?
Yeah, well, I was a columnist first with the Huffington Post, and now I'm an opinion columnist with USA Today, and so a lot of that was written for the newspaper at the time. And then a couple of those essays were also just, things I'd observed over the years that weren't really newsworthy. But yeah, definitely I'm always moved to want to speak for teachers. And I'm always very appreciative when teachers reach out to me and let me know and validate that, I am speaking, for them, among many other, there are a lot of other teachers, expressing their views too. But
I have just a selection of some of the publications here, just a few out of the 18 diets that work when you were ghostwriting here as well. But also you wrote a book because you coach. Don't you coach still?
I'm about, hopefully not anymore. I've retired from basketball coaching about 5 years ago.
Because you wrote a book on Magic Johnson.
Yeah. I've been pulled out of retirement twice, but hopefully. Yeah, Magic. I always felt, I was, of course, living in LA. He was a mega hero of the city. He was LA for a while. And also because we're the same age, I always felt a strong connection somehow to Magic. Although I've never met him, but I feel a kind of closeness. And I like the way he plays too. Because he's a passer. Yes. And it's good you got to share the ball. I would always tell my players.
Then the one just down to here. Now's the time. Was that your first foray into fiction? And that one interests me because I'm a jazz singer.
Yeah, so no, actually, that was my 4th one. I wrote a novel, a basketball novel called Fake Out, which was almost made into a movie several times. And then I wrote a book. I wrote actually a murder mystery that takes place in a school called Unfinished Business, and then a political thriller. But and there's Lightman.
Now, just coming to Lightman, which is, and it's very dark and it's very humorous at the same time.
How ironic that it's dark and it's called Lightman.
I mean, it's a fantastic book, and it struck me as I was reading it. The title, you could easily have called it Percy.
I know. Percy almost steals the show, doesn't he?
He does. I was just thinking, hang on, who's the lead in this book now?
Yeah,
Is
who's
it
the
Al
protagonist?
or
Is
is
it
it
the man or the
Percy?
dog?
The dog has nearly stolen the show all the way through, but
Yeah.
it is a wonderful, wonderful book. And I mean, as people are describing it as insightful, passionate, authentic, you write in a very fresh way. You tell it like it is. And in your fiction as well, you're doing that. I thought, for a moment, I had to, when I was reading the first few chapters, I had to think for a second, what kind of narrative voice am I in here? I know it's first person, but it's not at the same time. You create something very, very fresh with this.
Thank you. Yeah, it took me many years to get to Al in this book. I wrote this story many different times, many different ways, and Al just came out. He just decided. It's like he just declared his existence. And
so basically, he's a guy just trying to be a man in the world.
Yeah, and he really doesn't know how. He really doesn't know, and it's at a time when it's at sort of the beginning of the crisis, of male identity. And I don't want to make too much
it's based around 1973.
Yeah, it's 1973, which is the beginning of the feminist movement, and I don't want to make too much out of, crisis in male identity. I mean, the fact is, men didn't have to worry about that for so long. They could just be lazy about who they were. Especially white men. And, but Al doesn't have a lot of advantages. Al did not come from a loving family. He was sort of like the runt of the litter who just got kicked around in his own family. And he just expects to be kicked around. He's just looking for his little corner of the universe where he can quietly live out his life. But that's not how it works out, and of course, deep down, he wants more. And
he wants more. He's having a crisis of confidence. And then suddenly you drop in that he's actually been in Nam.
Yes, right. He forged his dad's signature to get to Vietnam, just to have somewhere to go, to be something else. And, like a lot of people, you think the army is going to make you a man, but, it makes you a soldier, it makes you a killer, and it often makes you dead. And in his case, he comes very close, but he survives a landmine and then just sort of bounces back to the States, ends up on the streets of New York with nothing and nobody, and gets this guy who owns a camera store takes pity on him, and that's where we find him, in the beginning of the story. Right, Leon and Al develops pictures and film in Leon's basement and hands out coupons, which is one of the more degrading jobs, walking around Midtown Manhattan trying to get people to take your photo coupon.
I know it is. I mean, I've been to New York a few times now, and I was just picturing it all in my mind, going down those streets, and just. Right. Yeah, I can just see this happening now. I
love
feel
the line where I think Mike is talking to him about being cussed out by actors, because Mike is a light man and he used to work inside the theaters, and
this is where your opening. I have to say, your opening to this in chapter 1, the whole opening, the way you've built this up. So Al is basically presenting himself. He wants an ice cream. He's in a queue. And then he's being kind of lazy, and he's enjoying the day, but something starts taking place. Two young brothers, just for viewers, without giving the whole story away, young brothers capture the attention not just of Al in the queue, but the whole queue.
For everybody, right? Because something's wrong with the older one. He's 6 years old and he's got a diaper on, and he's just. You can tell there's something wrong in his head. He's developmentally disabled. He's brain damaged, and then he just flips out. He has a conniption, starts biting and scratching himself, and Al does what everybody else does, which is he just looks at. and just,
Yeah.
just glad it's not me, glad it's not my
Glad
kid.
that's not me. I
Yeah.
know. And
And
feels
then,
immediately guilty. So you
and where's,
introduce in those scenes so much of the inner conflict,
yeah,
which,
yeah, he really does have a good heart, but, but he knows he can't afford to be too sensitive in this world.
and
And
then the father
then
appears.
he sees the father, right? He's
Yes.
like, everyone's wondering where the hell's the father. And then this guy comes in and he has this hat. It's like this magic hat. It's not really a magic hat. It's just a baseball cap. And he's strung little pieces of mirror to it, surrounding it, so that when he puts it on this boy's head, the sunlight reflects colors off the mirrors and it calms him down.
Well, that's a wonderful device actually that you found there, and it kind of came out of the blue. But I recognized it because I remember when I was about 18, my very first job was working in a centre for mentally handicapped children, mainly with cerebral palsy, and they used to love filling bottles with water and holding them up to the light and getting the color from the
Oh
sun.
my God. My brother, that character is Davy is based on my brother. I had an older brother who was developmentally disabled. And and he used to look at bottles of cherries and
Yes.
glasses of wine. And
Yeah.
I mean, just anything. The light, the liquid and the light would calm him down. And Al is so amazed that this man figured out how to calm his son down. It's this inspiring moment for him. Like, to him, that's a man. That's
Yes.
a man who doesn't care that everyone's staring at him and his son, a man who doesn't run away or walk away. He just figures out what to do, helping his kid. And, it really makes Al aspire. Although when he gets to know Mike, he sees that Mike is much more complicated than that.
Yes.
There's a lot about Mike that is not admirable. So, Al it's really a journey. It's really an inner journey for Al, this whole thing of figuring out the world and where he fits in it. Because he doesn't really think he does fit. Although by the end, ironically, he does feel much better about his place in the world, even though at the end of the book, he's actually in a penitentiary. But he feels it, but he knows that he's done something heroic.
You've left room there. You've left room there for a sequel.
That's funny. You're the second person. My cousin read the book and said, he and his wife are waiting for the sequel where, he gets married in jail or whatever.
Yeah, you've left
I
that
guess
open there.
that's my
It could
TV
happen.
writing experience must have made me do that.
And then you have this softening, which is brought in with the dog Percy. And really, you've got to pay very close attention to the role that this dog has in their lives, and how animals touch us. Animals open, they reach us, and even the ones we don't think we like.
Yeah, they are. They are a very important, part of many people's lives. And even me, like, we have a bird. Like, that's it. My wife's very allergic to cats and dogs. My former wife, I had a lot of dogs with her, so I kind of got to know the dog world. But they are. We have, we of course we should, treat them well, but also just, try to understand them, but also respect that we won't always understand everything about them. I at the school where I work, the school police used to round up the feral cats. There are feral cats all over the neighborhood, and dogs. There's a lot of stray animals. Lately there are geese too. I don't know where they came from, but
oh my God.
Anyway, these cats, the cops used to just round them up, trap them, and then have the animal collectors come. And we had a teacher who was like going to war with them, trying to get them to stop. She was feeding them, and she eventually took a bunch of them all. Anyway, it's funny now, years later, I see the cops are the ones feeding them, and it's kind of sweet. Like, I can't get over it because I still can't get used to, like, they're almost like, it's almost like the animals decided to endear themselves to these these cops so that they won't round them up and send them away. And every day I see them, and I feel like I want to talk to these cats. Like, I want to know what they've seen. I want to know where they've been. I want to know their story. But I have to respect the mystery. I'm never going to know their story. I can only imagine it. And I just look in their eyes and, be nice to them. I guess I could bring them some food too.
There was an aspect of that actually with Percy version A. In the book,
right, the first person.
Not giving too much away. That his real backstory with Travis. It was Travis, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The original owner. Your brain at various times in the story, you're wondering what is that story that he had, apart from what you've mentioned about Trudy, Al's girlfriend. What else could Travis have done to that dog?
Right.
And you revisit that with Percy version B as well.
Yeah.
And that there are certain things that kind of come to mind in that scene where that dog decides he's going to attack and protect Al, but attack him, attack Travis when Travis reappears. And suddenly a load of questions come to mind about the history that was there with that previous relationship. Right. And what is it that made Percy the way he was? And there are parallels then coming in with Percy and Al. And you can feel Al's getting it, But the thing is here, Larry, is that you're very good at triggering the reader to consider all these things. And then you break it up with humor. And one of the funniest ones was, playing the blind man with the dog in the theater.
Oh, yeah. In the liquor store. Right. When he's trying to get the beers and he doesn't
When he's trying to get the beers and he's no money, so he pretends he's blind. And the dog plays along. It was so funny. So funny. But I have to, at this point, I kind of have to say that, again, a dark story, but full of humor. And if you were ever, I don't know if you like Woody Allen, but I could see shades of Woody Allen coming in there. But the dialogue is amazing.
I don't know if I don't know if it's polite to say that now because of everything in his private life, but Woody Allen's a genius.
He's a genius.
I always admired his work. I mean, he made a movie a year until they stopped letting him make movies, and some of them were awful, but the ones that were good were just so great,
spectacular.
So
yeah,
great.
They were.
I'm not surprised that you see Woody Allen in as an influence of mine. He absolutely was.
Can we go to your mum for a moment? The wonderful Charlotte Ray. Oh my gosh, she was brilliant. I remember her so well. And 92 when you lost her, was it? Was she 92?
Yes, she had just turned. She was a few months past her 92nd birthday.
What an age!
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. We had like 20 people over for her birthday, including Elliot Gould, the actor.
Wow!
Isn't that interesting? They became friends very much at the end. I mean, they'd
really?
always, I remember he's very nice. He's a really sweet guy. And they became friends. So he was there.
Now, of course, we will remember her from, she was Edna Garrett in The Facts of Life. I'm sure loads of people will see. I'll flash these images up a little larger as well so people can see them. And of course, I forgot that she played the same character in Different Strokes.
Yeah. I mean, it was the same name.
The same name.
Oh, no. You know what's interesting about that is she was Mrs. Garrett. She did not have a first name when she was on Different Strokes. They didn't come up with the first name until she had the spinoff. And the woman she named herself after was the mother of my brother's girlfriend. My brother had a brief relationship with a developmentally disabled girl, and my mother and her mother became friends. They were from very different worlds. Her mother worked in a frozen food factory in Central California, and they lived in a trailer. But my mother felt like they were sisters.
Isn't that extraordinary?
They do the same thing. Yeah. And Edna died. She died of cancer a few years later. And my mother was devastated by it. She decided, to honor her, she would name her character Edna.
Wow, isn't that extraordinary? And I like. Do you feel that she influenced you with regard to your writing? Do you feel that
Oh,
she?
absolutely. I think probably, I mean, both my parents, who were both artists, you know, I think the ways that they influenced me the most was just how hard they worked. I've always been willing to work very hard, and to be a dreamer, to just
Yes,
believe in myself, even though, so often the business just beats you down and says you're nobody, you're nothing, you're not good enough. That's the nature of the business, not the
but
people in the business.
as a literature lecturer and teacher, um, what do you say to your students with regard to that? I mean, how often when we were in primary school did we, and certainly I did I have teachers saying, oh, she's a dreamer, because
Oh
I
yeah,
was a
no,
dreamer.
I tell them to dream. I tell them to dream big and, set their sights high, but then you have to be willing to work. You got to be
Yes,
willing to do the work. After my mother passed away, I found piles of scripts and, plays, TV, old facts of life scripts. Everything was just covered in her pencil scratchings. She had marked every page, motivation. What is the character thinking? I mean, she didn't just get on the set and say her lines. She
yes.
worked really hard to make it good. She was a perfectionist and just such a hard worker. And my dad was too. The other thing they taught me was, as a teacher, the way they influenced me was as a teacher, and that is that they never gave up on my brother. And Mike, the character Mike, is very much not like my father. My father is nothing like that man, in a way. But one way they are similar is my dad tried to fix my brother. He tried everything, and in his own way. A lot of it was through music. My father was a music guy. He was a classical composer. He did some composing for movies and TV also. But he got my brother into music, and he could soothe them through music. But they never gave up on him. They were told back in the 50s, people with children like my brother were told, just get rid of him. Send him to an institution. He'll ruin your family. He'll ruin your life. They don't understand anyway. Just send them. He's bad. He's a bad seed, whatever. I mean, that's what the people were told.
Oh yeah, it
In
was.
fact, the great playwright, one of my heroes, Arthur Miller, followed that advice and sent his own son, to live in an institution his whole life. And he wasn't a bad guy for doing it. It's what you were supposed to
It's
do.
what you were told to do.
But my
Yes.
parents wouldn't do it. My parents refused to give up on him until the day he died. They thought he could get better in some way. And when I was younger, there was a time in my life when I thought they were like, my parents are a little crazy. They think he's going to get better, but he's not. But in retrospect, I realized that was like the greatest lesson they could have taught me, because I teach in an inner city school with at-risk kids, and I've taught kids that other people gave up on, and I could see why. And there were times when they gave up on themselves, and I just didn't give up on them. I just insisted, like, no, you can stay in school, you can stay out of jail, you can, and it worked. I mean, it didn't work for everybody, but the kids it worked for, they're now grown. Some of them are in their 40s, and they send me Father's Day cards every year, because they're like, I would have been dead or in jail if, and I didn't. It's not like it was not like I did any magic. It's not like, all I did was just believe it. That's it. I mean,
And
I
you
mean, I
met
did,
them
I
where
did.
they were at.
I mean, I was there, right? I talked to them. I listened. I was right. I tried. I did what I could to help them. I supported them, but the magic is, I was just stupid believing in them. Like, no matter what, I just believed in them, that they could be better, that they could grow up, grow out of it, whatever. And having somebody believe in you is so important. It's
Yes.
it's just There's nothing more powerful than that. I mean, that's what every good parent does. You know,
Yes.
that's what people who benefit from having good parents, that's one of the most important things. And but I learned that from my parents, because I mean, it's easy not to give up on your kids when they're great, you know, when they're brilliant and talented and well adjusted and happy. That's easy. I mean, but I saw my parents not give up on somebody who, you know, did not seem like he had any hope.
Well, Larry, it must be an absolute joy for your students to come into school. They know you, they know your story, they know that they're supported by you. They've seen what you've done in your own life. They know what you've come from, and that's giving them hope. It has to. It's very contagious. You know, I think you're
Well,
marvelous. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
yeah, I'm the one though who's, it's a joy for me to go to work every day and be with them. I'm the one who's honored to be with my students. They're incredible. I mean, what they've been through, you know, and what I can't get over it. What, you know, their struggles and how they've been able to overcome them. And I know, like, you know, I know every one of my students, you know, there's some other kid on their street who's not in school anymore, who's dropped out, who's, you know, in the criminal justice system, or, you know, has kids already, or has just dropped out, given up on school and given up on themselves. And, you know, so, and they're applying to college now, my seniors, and they're doing it themselves for the most part. Some of them have parents who are able to help them, but a lot of them don't. And, you know, I tell them, look, my kids, we had to do a lot with them to get them through this process. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's stressful. And, you know,
And
you're
it will
doing
be
it on your own.
ongoing even when they go to university.
Yeah, yeah, you still
Yeah.
have to do your financial aid stuff. I mean, they have to grow up very fast. So, I mean, it's the feeling's mutual. I just,
Yeah, but and you've got, I'm sure you tell them, look, if you need any help, I'm there. You know,
oh
because
yeah,
once
I
you
mean,
get into
yeah,
freshmen,
there's a core of teachers at the school who you know, we work overtime helping them with their essays and helping them with their applications, and yeah, and then we have to write letters of recommendation. So, and
yes.
just sitting with them, like looking at, I've got, you know, I have a kid, like she's getting, you know, UPenn and Duke, they're asking her to apply and they're saying we'll waive the fee. And she's like, I don't know. Do I want to go to this place? I don't know. And I'm like, let's go on the computer. Let's look at it. You know, let's
Yeah.
see. It's just
Very
like,
often you have to talk them into the right headspace. That they're almost, there's sometimes they're quite shocked that they're actually at the point now where they've got to make that decision. And you've
yeah.
got all of these fears and all of the
Oh,
self-doubt,
yeah.
and you have to catch them and listen and watch and monitor so that they do actually make that step.
Yeah.
Because
it's a big
the
step.
financial side of it is a huge barrier.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's something that upsets me a lot, that schools will give an admission, an offer to a kid who clearly cannot afford the tuition, without providing, you know, some schools will provide financial aid, full financial aid, but why bother? Why bother? Why tell a kid who's never has seen more than $20 that they're going to owe $20,000 a
I
year?
know.
You can't tell them that. That's unfathomable to them. It's not fair. You know, it's just, don't bother them. Just leave them alone. They're not going to your school. You know, some colleges are a little out of touch. Even some of the colleges that should not be out of touch are. I mean, I had a student who both her parents were deported. She was completely on her own. Excuse me. And you know, she didn't. They had a mandatory orientation, $150 to stay up there. You could commute, but she had no way to commute. She had no way to get up there. She could take a bus, but she'd have to stay over. It would have cost $150. She doesn't call anybody because she's ashamed. She doesn't call and say, "What are you doing? I can't." She's ashamed because she internalizes it. So then they drop her, you know, and I
Yeah.
call up, I say, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be the state university where first generation students go. Don't you understand what it means to be a first generation student? What is wrong with you people? Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. And the person answering the call is like, you're right, but it's not a her. It's the system is just so, it's just so out of touch, you know. And this woman ends up being nice and helping her, and even helping pay for some. And we're like together, we're paying for some of these fees. But it's like, okay, so now
Yes.
you're another sucker like me, because the system is so brutal and cruel. And you know, if you're going to say we don't care about first generation students, then admit it, but don't pretend you do and have some
Yeah.
ridiculously stupid policies. You know, sorry, you got me going.
No, I
Yeah,
know, but
you
I
got me.
understand. I
I got
totally
myself
understand
going.
it. It's very, and the misinformation as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will have novice teachers. I don't mean to be singling out novice teachers, but it just so happens that recently this has been the problem in our house.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot of students who come in here, you know.
Yeah.
And you have novice teachers who are, and it's another reason why I feel it's a good idea to mark the exams at least once in your life. When you
Hmm.
realize what the actual criteria is, what the examiner is actually looking for, and you realize you haven't been helping your student prepare for that.
Mm.
That you think you have, but you haven't, you know. And then
Yeah.
suddenly you see what the exam, you know, is going to be about
Yeah.
for them. And then you've these novice teachers who give them the wrong information about the exam.
Right. But that's my whole problem with like the whole fact that you're saying novice teacher, and that somebody's education is depending on somebody who's still learning how to do the job. You know, to me, that's the problem. Like, and when you're a novice, you should be like an apprentice. You should be
Yes.
the assist. You should be the co-pilot until you know how to fly the plane. But
Well, you
we're
see, when I was living in France, I was living in France for 5 years, and that's the situation I was in initially. When I used to go into a primary school in the afternoon, a middle class primary school in the afternoon, and it was a working class one in the morning. That was a tough one. But on each occasion, I'd go in, and the main teacher, the main teacher of the class, would go to the back of the room, and I would take over.
Mhm.
And that was a very, very good way for two teachers in the room to be able to monitor what's going on,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and make any changes and see reactions of students. Sometimes the actual French teachers were amazed at how the other students reacted to me, you know, and it was that kind of, you know, collaboration, which is
Yeah.
really only growing now, I think, in the system over
Yeah.
here, but it was well and truly operational in France. And it
Mm.
worked. It really worked very, very
Yeah, it's
well.
much better. And you learn from each other. Teachers learn from each other.
Absolutely.
We had a teacher. I remember I had a principal who believed very much in hiring smart people to come teach in the school. Like, she didn't care what subject you taught, and what it was like, you know, if you had a background and you knew things, she felt like students are going to learn from you. And
It doesn't
I
mean you'll be a good teacher.
no, it doesn't, but you can become a good teacher. And you know, and if you have the desire. And so she would, and so I remember she hired this guy. He's actually a guy I met on an airplane, who saw me marking papers. And he was a screenwriter like I was, but you know, and
Oh,
he'd
the
gone,
chances of
yeah,
two
he,
screenwriters sitting beside
oh,
each
well,
other.
that's on an LA to New York flight, that's pretty good chance. But he he and he, you know, he watched me marking his paper. He's like, no, I was thought about teaching. And I talked to him, and I, by the time I was finished talking to him about my job and my students, he really wanted to come teach in my school. So I was like, come meet my principal. I don't know. He met my principal. She hired him. And the first year that he was there, he had no classes. In other words, she hired him to be a sub, like what we were talking about, to sub and to help out. She just thought like, there are too many, there, you know, there were too many teachers at our school who, they may have been good teachers, they may have not been good teachers, but they just didn't know a lot. They weren't worldly.
Yes.
She wanted kids to be exposed to people who had traveled, who had, you know, gone to Ivy League schools, so that our students could be connected to that world in a way and aspire in that direction. Anyway, so he had, for his first year, he didn't, actually, he could, he would sub, he would fill in, he got brought along slowly is the point. And I watched and I thought, and he became a pretty good teacher. I don't think he would have survived if he'd just been thrown into a classroom. Like, I think he would have I think he would have drowned
Yeah.
initially, as so many teachers do.
Yeah.
And, and he wouldn't, and the students would have been drowning too. That's the thing. When a teacher's struggling, the students aren't getting anything. The students are being cheated. And so, yeah, if you struggle and pay your dues for 3 years or 5, then yeah, you become a good teacher. Meanwhile, what about those kids? What about their parents? Would you want your kid in that class? No. So it's not fair. It's not fair that we say, okay, you sink or swim. And if you sink, well, maybe you'll eventually swim. Meanwhile, every day matters for those kids. Every interaction, with every opportunity for them to learn and have a meaningful educational experience that's squandered, that's a tragedy to me. So I think we've got to figure out a better system.
I think also we've got to get back to realizing that teaching is a vocation. Yes, it's a career, and it's being marketed as a career, and go into teaching, and all the package is put forward. But you have to have the vocation. You've got to have the pastoral side.
Yeah, and it's an art. It's
Yes.
There's talent involved also. You can become a good teacher, but there are things that are, there are our abilities, the empathy, the ability to understand students. Also, if your background is very different from the students, then you got to figure some way out to understand that.
Yes.
Who your students are and where they come from. I mean, I see that. We have 2 teachers who are one's Russian, one's Ukrainian, and I see they struggle, but they're good. Like, they're figuring it out. They both raised kids here, so they're figuring it out, how to understand the kids and how they think, and just their perspective, and to see things from their perspective. But the cultural thing can be, can make it a challenge. But I think most of all, I think you have to love kids. I think if you don't love kids, get out, go do something else, because you are getting them, especially in high school, you're getting them at their worst. This is the worst they're ever going to be. And their parents, half of the parents don't know what's happened to them. They've turned into monsters from the parents' perspective. They're at their worst, and they need somebody in their life who appreciates them, who says, you're perfect, even though, you're not the person you're going to be in 3 or 5 years, but you're okay. You're a teenager. Yeah, you're selfish. Yeah, you're supposed to be selfish. I mean, you can try to be less selfish, but this is the most selfish time of your life. And I'm not going to condemn you for it. I'm not going to act like there's something wrong with you. When I was a teenager once, and I was just like you, it's just, you can point it out to them, but you have to love them when they're at their worst. I mean, when they're trying to manipulate you, or they're lying to you, or they're being rude. Just the other day, I have a rule, particularly since COVID, since we were on distance learning for a year and a half, and kids didn't have to ask to go to the bathroom. So now I feel like, especially if you're a senior, you should not have to ask somebody if you can go to the bathroom. It's a little demeaning. But
do you still have to do that with the seniors in the States?
Well, most teachers require that, yeah. And so,
well, I have to say we don't hear for that level. They just have to indicate.
You're ahead of us. You're ahead of me. So you leave, but I say to them, but be polite about it. Let's be polite about it. I mean, leave at the right time. Show that you care about. At least pretend that you care about the class. Don't leave when we're in the middle of a discussion. Try to wait until, I've given the assignment and everyone's starting to work. There are good times to go to the bathroom. But if you have an emergency, just go. You don't have to ask. And so the other day, the kids were giving presentations to each other, and, they're walking out on each other. And I didn't like that. I was like, it's okay. You walk out on me, but don't walk out on each other.
On
You
each
know,
other.
'cause
I
it's
know.
hard to be up there. I'm used to it. I can deal with it. So after it was over, I just had a nice little lesson on. I said, when's a good time to leave? Now, oh, Roxanne, you left at a good time. Izu, no, you didn't leave me. But Izu, you did a good thing though. Show them how you open and close the door when and we have these heavy metal bulletproof doors. So if you just let go of it, it slams. And he was very polite. He had opened it and very gently closed it. I was like, look at that. That's good. But I mean, even when they're being rude and totally unconscious, like totally not thinking about anybody else, that's who they are. I mean, they can be better, but like you got to appreciate. I mean, that's all I can say is like if you're going home saying I can't stand these kids, then why are you doing that to yourself? If you
Yes.
don't love them, they'll drive you crazy.
Yeah.
You got
But there
love
will come
their
that
work.
time, and you have to have faith in this too, that there will come that time when they will look back and they'll realize what you did for them. And indeed, what we do see it happen here. I mean, particularly my husband, because he has his own well, we would it's a private tutoring school here, but it's for all kids, it's not for posh kids. It's for everybody. But he has very often had people who were with him 5-6 years ago come back and say, Colm, if you hadn't brought me back to the basics, if you hadn't invested that time in me, I would not have made it through my freshman year. I was that far behind in my maths because my maths teacher was hardly in,
Well, that's the thing, as bad as rude and thoughtless as they can be at times, because again, they're at their worst moments of their life. Yeah, they're so sweet some other
I know.
times. And they're great, and yeah, there's always appreciation. I mean, I agree. It's I'm always getting texts and emails from kids when they're in college, like their first year in college, and I feel prepared, and they
Yes.
want to let me know, like they're the
And
best
that's
writer in the class.
fantastic that they want to let you know, and it means so much to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't, and then my school, even though it's in a big city, and in a community with a lot of people, we get a lot of I get a lot of second generation students who's like, oh yeah, you were my mom's teacher too.
Yeah, that's a terrible feeling when they start saying that.
No, I used to say I was going to retire when that happened, but the first time that happened was 10 years ago. And or my uncle or my cousin, and 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 they're like, oh, they said you got to take Strauss's class. And so it happens a lot, and a lot of them come, they come back to visit. They want to show you they've grown up and what they're doing. And so I mean, if you're able to stay in the same school for a while, it's just very, the rewards are just endless. But it's not easy to stay in the same school.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been very, 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 very fortunate. I mean, so many people get bounced around for various reasons.
Well, usually at this point, as we wind up, I'd normally ask an author if they have maybe 3 pieces of advice for any budding writers. I was going to ask you that, but I could easily ask it if you've got any advice for a budding teacher and for a student. So whichever of the 3 you want to answer, take your pick.
Wow. Well, maybe I should give one piece of advice for each.
For each, that would be a good idea.
All right. So let me start. Well, teacher's probably the easiest. No, maybe it's the hardest. Oh my God. Advice is hard. I'm good at giving advice when somebody actually presents me with a specific problem. For teachers, I'd say just remember that it gets much, much better. The first year cannot be more stressful, but the second year barring external catastrophe, should be much easier because you know you've been through it. And,
Yes.
remember, you need confidence. And it's just not natural to have confidence until you've accomplished something that you can tell yourself you've accomplished. And when you're new, you have to look at the small things that you have accomplished. Remember, you're not going to be perfect. I mean, I've counseled or mentored new teachers who got straight A's their whole lives in school, and they're crying because their first class they taught didn't go right. And I say, it's not going to be like those straight A's, throw them out the window. You're not going to be perfect at this. You are going to fail and fail better, hopefully. But you will get confidence. And, the other thing is when you've been in the school longer than the students, it'll feel more comfortable too. Because when you're
Yes.
newer than they are, that you never feel like you completely got your footing until you become a veteran teacher. I can walk into another school for summer school and I can own it. Like, this is mine now. And, because it's a classroom, any classroom is mine and you're in my world now. And the kid, the other thing is the kids want that. They love when you're confident.
Yes.
And you know what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. They pick up immediately. If you don't have confidence, they pick that up the minute they walk in.
They want you to be strong because they feel so weak inside.
Yeah.
As a student, I would say, don't let anyone define you, but also don't even define yourself. You have no idea how brilliant you are. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And stop telling yourself that you're what other people have told you are, especially the worst things people have told you are in your worst moments. That's not who you are. You will be an adult and you will get through wherever you are. I've seen students who seem completely overwhelmed and miserable, and I see them 3, 4, 5 years later and they've made it. They've produced a mature, successful adult out of whatever mess they were when they were teenagers. And then as a writer, God, I have so much advice for writers. I'll say this: read your work out loud and listen to it. Don't ever trust your eyes to judge your work. You have to have your eyes and your ears. When here, I'll show you this. I have a copy of this book. Excuse me for a second. When I wrote this book back in the 90s, it was actually optioned. This was optioned for a movie back in. It was a ridiculous amount of money they paid me. That they would never pay now, before it was even published. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was supposed to be one of the producers on it.
Yes.
I don't know if it's still in print. Kensington bought out this company, but I'm sure you can always get used copies somewhere. Anyway, I was doing a reading at a bookstore, reading and signing, and I was reading, and some of the sentences I realized in mid-reading that there were words I should have cut out. There were just little things that weren't right in it. I heard them, and I hadn't heard them before. I hadn't read it out loud before.
Yeah.
And it was so awkward. It felt so awkward. As I was reading it, I was almost cringing, like, And I got home. I had another reading to do, and I got home and I took a pencil and I marked up my own book.
Yes.
And I felt like such a fraud because I read it the next time I did the reading. I read the good version, the marked up version. But of course, people who bought the book didn't get that. So it was kind of a fraud that I had.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But isn't it? It just shows you we're always learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when my next novel came out, Light Man, which not Light Man, Now's the Time, which I think we talked about.
Now's the time. Yes.
Now's the Time. Jazz novel. I went over. I read this thing out loud, just to myself. Like, I did not
Yeah.
force anyone in my family to sit through that, but I read every word and I listened to it. And I have to tell you, I still, I stand by every phrase in this book. Like, I just, it's the writing, the sentences are just the way I want them. I mean, they may not be the greatest ever written, but they're the best I can write, and I stand by it. And and so I'm proud of that book. And the same with Lightman. I made sure to do that with Lightman. So read it.
Yeah, because with
listen.
Lightman, I immediately became aware in the first page and a half of how you were slipping into the speak of the 1970s. It immediately comes at the author. So you're going into the right age group, you're changing the speak to suit the time, and it immediately wakes the reader up.
Thank you.
It was really, absolutely great. Larry, thank you so much for coming on there. I knew there'd be so many interesting things to listen to, because you are a great communicator, and that's required both as a writer, it's required in the classroom, and as a performer. And you've got that down, and it is so evident in your writing, and both books which I read this week I absolutely loved, thank you so much for writing them.
Well,
and I hope that you will talk to us again at some stage.
Absolutely. Oh, I was going to say, and you are a genius interviewer. It was you are in the tradition of Dick Cavett and Barbara Walters and
you're very
Johnny
kind.
Carson.
You're very kind. My gosh.
No, and also very generous, because I just remembered it's 1:20 in the morning.
It's 1:20 in the morning, and I'm going to have a cup of tea.
Of course.
Cup on tea. Cup of tea. The A sound again that we were talking about off camera. A cup of tea. I never got a chance to ask you this, but if I could just ask you very, very quickly, ghostwriting. Was that a turning point for you? Because I'm sure it's I've had one other person on who was a professional ghostwriter, and it was very interesting. How did you find the experience of ghostwriting?
It's great training as a novelist, because you're trying to create a voice for somebody else, and that was that was, and even the book I worked on with my mother, even though my name's on it, it was I was trying to get into her voice, and that was great training. And of course Al, creating a character, a persona. So I think I probably owe my ghostwriting and my co-authoring to that effort. So
the Facts of My Life was the one you wrote about your mother?
Yeah, or with my mother. I mean, I have to say, of course, I did the drafts, but she did her part like an actress.
Yes.
She took every page of that, and she, like I said, read it out loud, only she didn't read it out loud. She performed it.
Yes.
She did it like she was playing a character who was her. And she would get to a certain sentence or a certain paragraph, and she wouldn't say it. And I'd go, "What's the matter?" She'd go, "I wouldn't say it that way. Wait, let me improvise." And then she would, to her, it was an improv. It wasn't writing. It was like, "You're writing, Mom. That's called writing." But no, she was improvising her character. And, and that was also, that taught me a lot also.
Yeah, excellent training then, and something that not a lot of people would think to do, but I think ghostwriting is excellent training. It's a really, really good thing to do.
Also, I learned a lot about medicine because I wrote two books with a doctor. That's one of them. The other one, my name isn't on. It's called Growing Younger, and then I wrote a book with a dietitian. So the other thing is ghostwriting. You can learn a lot.
You can learn a lot. Absolutely, you can.
Nonfiction.
Larry, it's been a joy to have you on. Thank you so much for being with us. And as I say, I'd be delighted if you came back at some point in the future when you've written another 18 books.
Yeah. Okay.
Which will no doubt happen, I'm sure. Thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you.
today.
Take care.
Thank you.